Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just gave out some winners and losers of the trade deadline. Now, notably, I did not mention the Golden State Warriors or LA Lakers. Both of them stayed put for the most part, other than the Warriors making one little deal to offload a Corey Joseph contract just to try and cut down on some costs, but really nothing all too significant for either one of these teams. The Lakers and the Warriors are the 9th and 11th seeds respectively in the Western Conference. The Warriors now obviously even outside of the play-in tournament threshold. So how do we evaluate these teams? What sort of expectations do they have for themselves? Were they right or wrong for doing this? I honestly think in both of these teams' cases, can't really blame them for not making all too many moves. Now, the Warriors were a little more interesting. I think that they had some more young pieces that they possibly could have parted ways with. Matching up the contracts gets a little bit messy there, so I'm not totally sure how that would have worked. Klay Thompson has the contract to maybe go out and match a star player elsewhere, but I just don't think that they were ever going to do that to him just based off of sort of the pedigree and how he has, been a part of this franchise for so long now, and it would have been a little bit dirty. Would it have been unforgivable? No. He has even admitted this year the hardships of him not really being the guy anymore, and he hasn't been. And it actually is pretty sad seeing some of the interviews with him in the post-game scrums and the frustration he has on the bench. Curry was trying to console him the other day, but he was just so visibly upset because he's not the same player he used to be. And this is someone who he hasn't had it easy necessarily. He missed 2 straight seasons with different lower body injuries. And, he comes back and he used to be just the epitome of an elite 3-and-D player. And we've just fallen from that. And again, it is unfortunate to sort of see the state that he is in physically and emotionally, but that's unfortunately how Father Time works. So all of that to be said, they potentially could have made a deal if they were going to part ways with a guy that has so much legacy and so much baggage within Warriors history. But it seemed like, especially to some degree, I'm curious what sort of factors the new GM played in, because in some ways it would have been easy for Mike Dunleavy, who took over for Bob Myers this past year. He didn't have a real attachment to Klay Thompson that way that Myers would have, and I think that Myers probably knew, and part of the reason why he's gotten out of that gig, by the way, I think he's great on ESPN and the basketball coverage that he provides, but I think he knew some tough choices were going to have to be made in the next handful of years. He probably still has some years ahead of him in case he wanted to get back into the NBA front office gig, but I think he's holding it down right now as an analyst. So, I just think that it never really ends pretty with dynasties. We saw this with the Patriots, obviously, as soon as this season, where they were just a miserable watch week in, week out. They've been a very miserable watch the past 2 years, and Bill Belichick ends up without a head coaching job. It's not supposed to end pretty. You want to ideally squeeze out every ounce of greatness that you can. And here's the thing. I talked about on the show a couple weeks ago the fact that I do think that we're past this core being a contender. As far as can they turn this season around, I do think they can to some degree. Now, they benefit from the Utah Jazz trading off 2 of their key role players in Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji, where they can fall out a little bit more. The Jazz and the Warriors are currently tied in terms of games back from the 1 seed. The Jazz just have played a handful more games than the Warriors have, partially due to the Warriors' delayed schedule. So they've played 4 games less than the Jazz. Is a very easy opportunity for the Warriors to climb themselves back into that 10 seed and at least be competing for a play-in spot. But again, even from there, let's say they get there, I still don't think that this is any sort of a real championship contending team. And I know that's not even a hot take at this point. That's how most people feel. But, they've had some highs lately. Jonathan Kuminga has been incredible for them for the past handful of weeks. I think he's so fun to watch. A little bit erratic at sometimes, but he is going to be at least an all-star caliber player, I think, the way that he is sort of taken off. Very high pedigree guy coming into the league. He goes to the G League Ignite, and he's not fully polished yet. There's a lot of mistakes still, and G League Ignite isn't necessarily the best place, I feel like, in terms of development of these young prospects. Comes into a win now scenario with the Warriors, and he obviously publicly challenged Steve Kerr in terms of whether or not he should be getting minutes. Lately, he has been getting minutes. He's been closing games, and he's been great for them. Andrew Wiggins has at least sort of been playing some good basketball as of late for the first, doing, 75% of the first half season. He has been pretty bad, just overall flat out bad. I'm still very curious to see whether or not whatever situation was going on last season where he had to miss a lot of time because of personal reasons, what sort of mental toll that took on him. Seems like it did affect him pretty much. But we're talking about Wiggins here, who he was disappointing in Minnesota his first handful of years. He comes out, he has that incredible run to help the Warriors win the finals in 2022. Now has fallen back down to earth a little bit. Maybe this is just who he is, but he's been building up a little bit of confidence in the past few weeks. Maybe he can sort of turn this around, and the offense as a whole has just been firing at such a higher rate since Draymond Green has come back from suspension than he was prior. The defense, they just don't really seem to have the all in all defenders and maturity that they did in the prime Warriors days, but they still very much can play offense, and they're over 128 points per game since Draymond has come back from that suspension. He seems to be playing with a little bit of a heightened sense of maturity. We'll see how long that lasts, but again, I think that they can be fine this year, but ultimately they can even be good this year, but what is good in this deep Western Conference is the issue. As for the Lakers here, a lot of different debates on whether or not they should have been active, especially LeBron James sort of pouring gasoline into the fire with that, tweeting out hourglass emojis, wearing a New York Knicks towel, doing all these things to sort of try and put pressure on the front office to make moves. But given where they are right now, I just don't know if making a panic trade really would have been the solution. Now, because they only have one tradable first round pick as of this past trade deadline. It was the 2029. What I disagree with them is thinking that Austin Reeves was this untouchable for them. Austin Reeves is a good player, but to make a flat out statement that you're not willing to move off from him. Rui Hachimura is another guy where, he's been dealing with injuries this year as well, but I feel like he could have been a movable piece. But, ultimately, I just don't think there was that much in the market that they could have gotten for him. I don't know if trading that 2029 pick alone to try and reach for someone to contend this season would have been worth it. a lot of this same Lakers core. Now, I know Jared Vanderbilt has a foot injury and he's expected that he may be out for the remainder of the regular season. We'll still see on that. But a lot of this core that's still remaining is the core that took them to the Western Conference Finals last year. And you get swept, but you put up a very good effort and maybe caught some breaks along the way, playing a Minnesota team that was imploding on themselves, playing a very young Memphis Grizzlies team that wasn't really to be taken too seriously, was struggling with health in the backcourt in the front court in the backcourt with size and injuries going on there. But you have a lot of the same guys. It would have been nice to more so see LeBron sort of embrace the guys that he has left with him on that roster and say, hey, we were there last season. We just have to start building up momentum. And instead, he's sort of been playing these cryptic games of trying to bully the front office into making moves that are a little irrational. But the reality of the situation is LeBron James isn't in the peak of his powers anymore. He's not, 29 years old. He's 39 years old. And as much as the Lakers would love to have him for the time being, he has this player option for a big number coming up this offseason. If he declines it and goes somewhere else, I think that, it's not as devastating to the franchise as it would have been if you're losing this prime LeBron James. They got their championship with LeBron, and they've had some good seasons, but they can't fully put themselves at his will just because he's a little cranky about it. And, I think this is going to be a little bit of a stretch of what kind of leader can you be? Because he's always sort of been known to throw his guys under the bus, sometimes more subtle than others, sometimes more obvious than others, but there's no denying the greatness we saw during the in-season tournament. We're just talking about the in-season tournament. It didn't mean anything all too much in the grand scheme of, does this make you a contender? I mean, they played the Pacers in the finals for that, but when LeBron really sets his mind to things and he's bought in on it and he's committed, he can play basketball just about as good as anybody else. And, I do think that they can maybe not be contenders necessarily, but they can definitely be in that realm. And, who knows? Once LeBron James gets hot, I mean, we're talking about one of, if not the greatest basketball player in the history of the game. And it's not like they have zero talent around him either. Would I be picking them? No. We are about to be heading into some power rankings here, and I don't have them in the contention tier, but they can be a lot better, sort of, than they've been playing for a good stretch of this season, and turn things around some, at least, to show who is still going to be a part of the team as they continue to stay competitive this year and years ahead. So on that note, we're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back on the other side, I will be giving my post-trade deadline power rankings, so stick with us.